What would you do if you were solely responsible for the people around you, but you couldn't properly provide for them? Let's say you're a generally financially responsible person. Sure, you splurge every now and then, but you make a fair amount of money to live off of, for you and your partner. Now let's say tragedy strikes. One of your relatives passes away, and you're left responsible for their children. At first, you think you can handle it. You love your nieces and nephews, and you know that this is what their parents would have wanted. You begin to take on more hours at work, with the hopes of getting a promotion and being able to earn more. But as time goes on, it begins to wear on you. The money begins to run out, and you opt to take out a few credit cards and loans, which only adds to the bills that you have to deal with at the end of each month. But you persevere, not allowing the kids to see you and your partner are struggling. You want them to feel safe and happy, and if that means putting on a happy face, you'll do it. As time goes on, you begin to feel hopeless. Your boss has refused to give you more hours, not wanting to hire you on full time, despite agreeing that you're indispensable to the company. So you try and get a second job to keep putting food on the table. But very few establishments are hiring, and the ones that are don't seem amenable to your other position. They want someone who can be on call whenever they're needed, and that isn't you. Worse still, your partner falls down the stairs while bringing in the groceries and suffers some kind of an injury. You take them to the hospital, where they're told that they need to stay off their leg for some time, meaning that they can't work and help out with the financial needs for the next month. Add that steep medical bill to the mountain of bills you already have to pay off every month, and next thing you know, you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. You feel like a failure, like you're failing your deceased relative, their children, and your partner. You're working intensely hard to make sure everything stays okay, but everywhere you turn, it feels like the universe is telling you to give up. You've already asked multiple family members and friends for their own help, asking them for loans and promising you'll pay them back. But by this point, you feel nothing but shame. You can't do this and you feel hopeless. The amount of stress that would place on a person is significant, and it's why financial strain is one of the leading motives for murder, and no case exemplifies that better than this one. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today is the first upload for our week-long celebration of Halloween, where we upload every weekday for the last week of October. This idea was sent in by a subscriber, and we thought it would be fitting given the immense amount of support our channel has received as of late, so as such, we want to give back. Every video we do this week comes from a submission to the channel from viewers like you, and as always, if there is a topic you want to see, let us know by leaving it in the comments down below or emailing us at dreading.official@gmail.com. We're constantly going through emails, cataloging your suggestions, with the ultimate hope of covering them with all of the nuance and grace that they deserve. Though our turnaround time is less than stellar, we hope that you stick by us to see it through. And if people like this and it goes well, maybe next month we can do Dreadsgiving or maybe Dreadcember or some other punny name that I can't think of right now. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I don't even know if that's feasible, so we'll see. But today, we're going to be covering the case of the Candyman, Ronald Clark O'Brien, and how he would use his Halloween celebration as a cover to try and kill nearly his entire family. I believe in some parts of the US, this case has become folklore. But in our opinion, this case is a prime example of laziness and greed and how far someone would go to ignore personal responsibility. So, with all of that said, let us begin. Ronald Clark O'Brien lived a relatively unremarkable life. Born October 19, 1944 in Texas, Bryan grew up in the suburbs of Houston. He rarely ventured out of the area, choosing instead to stay where he felt most comfortable. Many people who knew him would use that word to describe him regularly, as O'Brien rarely did anything that was outside of his comfort zone. He wasn't cautious, mind you. He simply didn't like being challenged. When he was given the option, he would choose the easy path every time. He married his wife Daneen, and together they had 2 children, a son named Timothy and a daughter Elizabeth. O'Brien appeared to have a typical life as a middle-class family man. He worked as an optician, managing eyeglass prescriptions and fitting lenses at a local optical company. He was also involved in his local church, where he was seen as a friendly and approachable person. O'Brien served as a deacon, participating in church activities and events, and was known as a family man who appeared to be dedicated to his children and community. To those who knew him, O'Brien was a church-going man and a caring father. Despite the seemingly stable facade, O'Brien struggled with severe financial problems. Reports on why he was constantly out of work vary, with some articles confidently stating that he would shirk his responsibilities, choosing to do things the easy way and not the right way. Other reports on this case will state that he would simply not show up to work, citing various injuries, but from the actual police and news reports, it seems unclear. What was clear, though, was the fact that Ronald's income was less than consistent, as he was frequently forced to change jobs. The weight of his financial burdens was compounded by mountains of debt, which led O'Brien to increasingly desperate measures. By Halloween of 1974, O'Brien's finances were out of control. He was in $100,000 of debt, and his job prospects had run out. Employers believed he had been stealing from them, but he refused to allow that to get in the way of his kids having the best Halloween possible. That cold October night, he and his neighbor took their 4 kids trick-or-treating in a neighborhood in Pasadena, Texas. They had gone to most of the homes on the block before approaching one whose lights seemed to be out. Instead of walking past the home, seeing as it appeared unoccupied, the group approached the home and knocked on the door. The kids waited with bated breath, hoping to get some candy from the dimly lit home, but no one arrived. Somewhat disappointed but excited to continue their candy crusade, the children and O'Brien's neighbor moved on, but he stayed back. He insisted that he saw movement within the home, and that he would get the person to come to the door, even if it meant waiting a bit longer. The neighbor and the kids brushed off Ronald's strange insistence, likely because they didn't feel like arguing with a grown man, and moved along. After going to a few of the other homes on the block, O'Brien came running up to the group, stating that he had been right all along, and the owner of the home eventually came to the door. He was unable to describe the man, claiming that he only opened the door partially, obscuring his face from view, and simply reached his hairy arm out, holding 5 Pixie Stix. The tubes of the powdered candy seemed a bit off upon inspection, as they weren't properly sealed. Instead of the regular candy packaging, it appeared that one side of the candy had been opened and then closed, with a staple sealing it. Now, in 2024, most parents would immediately suspect that the candy had been tampered with and throw it away. But this was 1974, and parents were not as aware as they are now. O'Brien distributed the candy amongst his kids and the neighbor's children, and gave the final Pixie Stick to a 10-year-old boy who was also scavenging the neighborhood that he recognized from church. Shortly thereafter, the weather turned sour, forcing the families to retire for the night after trick-or-treating for 2 blocks. Both Elizabeth and Timothy were ecstatic about their confectionery collection, and after surveying their spoils, asked their father if they could eat some portion of their plunder, and the father relented, telling both his son and daughter that they could have 1 item each. Timothy supposedly chose the Pixie Stick, although his mother claimed he originally chose another candy, but was coerced into trying the sugary treat by his father. After getting his father to help him remove the staple, took 1 taste of the powdered sugar and seemed disgusted. He complained that it tasted different and bitter, not at all what he expected. He was disappointed, given that he had been told he could only have 1 singular candy, only for it to have been foul. But Ronald was not without sympathy for his young son, and gave him a cup of Kool-Aid to wash it down. After finishing the sugary drink, Timothy complained that his stomach hurt before rushing to the bathroom. There, the 8-year-old began vomiting profusely and convulsing horrifically. Daneen and Ronald were horrified, and quickly called for emergency services. Ronald reportedly ran into the bathroom to try and provide aid to his ailing son, but according to his statements, the boy went limp in his arms. This contradicts with reports that emergency services were able to provide that state Timothy O'Brien died en route to the hospital. He was just 8 years old. News of Timothy's death spread through the community like wildfire, with parents immediately suspecting that the boy had been poisoned. For years, the public had been made to believe that nefarious people within certain communities would try to kill and maim their children during Halloween via their candy. This was seen most overtly in reports claiming that people were putting razor blades in apples, even though there's no evidence of this ever happening. There are very few confirmed cases of poisoned candy, but that fact has done little to stop the spread of misinformation and panic that has persisted for generations. Ronald and Daneen were not shy about what had occurred prior to Timothy's death, stating that their son had been perfectly fine prior to ingesting the Pixie Stick. O'Brien handed the candy packaging over to the police and appeared altogether inconsolable about his son's demise. When he asked where he acquired the candy from, he claimed he couldn't recall, that he was so overwhelmed with grief that it was all he could think about, and the police let him be, but noted that they needed to follow up with him at a later date. The police found this assertion odd, as they hadn't been out for long and only went to a few houses. But after he informed them that he had given the other Pixie Sticks to his daughter, the neighbor's children, and another unidentified child, the police sprang into action. Leagues of concerned parents arrived at the police station, bringing their kids' candy with them. fearing that it too had been poisoned, but they assured the public that as far as they knew, only 5 Pixie Stix had been tampered with. They were able to quickly retrieve the other 3, with the O'Briens turning over Elizabeth's candy, and the neighbors giving their children's candy as well. But the 4th was in the hands of a child that Ronald couldn't completely recall. Eventually, news of the tampered Pixie Stix was relayed to the parents of the other child, who poured out their son's spoils looking for the candy. Unable to find the large stick of sugar, they ran to his bedroom, where they found him asleep with the candy in hand. He had attempted to open the Pixie Stix, but the staple stopped him from doing so. The police requested that he walk them through his neighborhood, with the hopes that this would jog his memory. At the same time, other officers went door to door, asking each occupant about the candy that they had given out that Halloween. Surprisingly, no one said they handed out Pixie Stix. After walking around the neighborhood 3 times, Ronald eventually recalled where he had gotten the tainted treats, pointing to a home owned by an air traffic controller at a nearby airport. He claimed that when he was handed the candy, the man stayed in the shadows, so he would be unable to identify him, but was certain it was the home. But his lie was for naught, given that the man had been at work that night, and over 200 people were able to verify his alibi. At this point, the police began to look more closely at Ronald, and found that his behavior prior to his son's death was worrisome, to say the least. They found that he was about to be fired from his optometrist position and was suspected of theft. Not only that, they discovered that within the previous 10 years, he had a total of 21 different jobs, with each employer stating that they'd fired him. He was in over $100,000 of debt. His car was about to be repossessed, and the family home had recently been foreclosed on. Not only that, but in the months prior to his son's murder, Ronald had taken out multiple life insurance policies on both Timothy and Elizabeth, which added up to $100,000 if both children were to perish, the exact amount that would get him out of debt. Firmly establishing a motive to the crime, the police canvassed the areas, hoping to discover where O'Brien had obtained the poison. While they were never able to find the exact distributor that the father had used, they found that in the days leading up to All Hallows Eve, O'Brien had gone to a chemical supply store in the area and inquired about buying cyanide. When he was informed that the smallest amount the store carried was 5 pounds, he left the establishment, but the worker was able to remember him due to how strange he thought the request was. The police brought Ronald in for questioning and informed him that they had enough probable cause to arrest him for the murder of his son. They gave him their theory of events, stating that the unfortunate father had swindled his finances away far past the point of no return, and in order to save himself, he sacrificed his own children. He took out multiple policies on both his son and daughter with the plans of poisoning them along with the other neighborhood children, so no one would suspect he was the culprit. What he didn't expect was for his son to be the only one who ate the Pixie Stick, or for anyone to put together that he had been the one who handed them out. Despite the evidence pointing directly to his guilt, O'Brien maintained his innocence, and when he was eventually brought to trial, pled not guilty to all the charges. But things would only get worse for him. At trial, friends and family members and multiple chemists in the area took the stand to state that in the lead-up to his son's demise, O'Brien routinely talked to them about cyanide. He seemed unusually interested in the subject, asking them how to obtain the poison, how much they thought they would need to kill a person, and if it would be difficult to handle. His sister and brother-in-law also stated that on the day of Timothy's funeral, he talked excitedly about how he was going to use the money from the life insurance policies to go on a vacation and buy luxury items, despite already being in a mountain of debt. Yeah, that's not suspicious. Hey, my fucking kid is dead, but dear God, I need that gold jet ski covered in diamonds and the skulls of my enemies. You know what? Maybe something fancy like a zoot suit, monocle, some pantaloons like I'm the Monopoly guy. In fact, the zoot suit is what I wear when I ride the jet ski. But I digress. In response, O'Brien stuck to his initial story, saying that some stranger he couldn't identify gave him the tainted candy and killed his son. It took the jury less than an hour to find the fucking Monopoly guy guilty of capital murder, as well as guilty on 4 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection, and on March 31st, 1984, he would perish, but not before taking the time to say, quote, "What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as human beings do make mistakes and errors. This execution was one of those wrongs, yet doesn't mean our whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death. Also, to anyone I have offended in any way during my 39 years, I pray and ask for your forgiveness, just as I forgive anyone who offended me in any way. And I pray and ask God's forgiveness for all of us respectively as human beings. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. To those close to me, know in your hearts I love you, one and all. God bless you all, and may God's best blessings be always yours." If you've made it to this portion in the video, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Hollow Week upload and are looking forward to more. As always, if there's a subject you would like us to cover or a case you want more attention brought to, email me at dreading.official@gmail.com. Have a great day and remember, stay safe.